Former President Trump announced his support for several Republican candidates over the weekend. That includes South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster, Idaho Senator Mike Crapo. Crapo? How do you say it?
I think it's Crapo.
Crapo,
yeah.
there we go. Arkansas Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin.
Yeah, so are these endorsements living up to Trump's, definition of Trumpism? Assistant editor at American Greatness, contributor at Chronicles Magazine, American Culture. Pedro Gonzalez, he joins us now to discuss. Good to see you, Pedro. Thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, always good to be here. Thanks for having me back on.
Pedro, it strikes me, I did a whole monologue on this. Trump comes out and defines Trumpism. Great trade deals is the number one thing. And then the first person he endorses in the U.S. Senate is Jerry Moran, who was against China's trade war and was against his renegotiation of NAFTA. I mean, what exactly is going on here? You've called it MAGA Inc. What do you mean by that?
Right. Well, Eric Hoffer, a 20th century working class intellectual, once wrote that every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket. And unfortunately, I think the Trump movement is somewhere between a business and a racket. In other words, a grift. Mm-hmm. We campaigned against the establishment only to become the establishment 2.0. And I think that explains why you have these endorsements that don't correspond with at least the original 2016 platform of doing things like going to war with China in terms of trade, of renegotiating trade deals that help Americans, things like that. Why endorse people like Jerry Moran? Why endorse Jane Timken in Ohio, another person that has a lot of people raising eyebrows, who at least people that are aligned more with the movement and the cause than with Trump himself. And then you have Tim Scott. That's another latest one. Tim Scott, who was working with Karen Bass, who actually does believe in defunding the police, unlike many Democrats who I think don't really believe that, and it's just kind of like a vogue talking point. Karen Bass actually does want to do that. And Tim Scott has been working with her on police reform. So the law and order MAGA movement is giving the nod to people like this. And so what explains that? And I think that is the sad truth, is that MAGA, which railed against the establishment, and Conservatism Inc. has just become MAGA Inc.
Really interesting.
Why do you think that happened, and do you think it was inevitable?
I think it happened because, well, there's a lot of different things, and I might have to write a book about it someday. But in short, I think Trump didn't know really what drained the swamp, like the depth of that statement and that slogan, drain the swamp. And I think because, in part, he didn't really understand what he was getting into, he delegated to the wrong people. People that he trusted, people that were loyal to him, not necessarily because they're aligned with the America First concept. People like Jared Kushner, people like Brooke Rollins, basically a lot of people that would be at home either under a George Bush administration or a Barack Obama administration. And of course, the buck stops with Trump. But I think this is actually a huge part of it, is his bad judgment of character with bad personnel telling him what to do, and him generally going along with that. So.
And Pedro, I can imagine you get quite a bit of pushback against this. How do you think that Republicans can handle it? Because look, Trump is the single most popular figure in the Republican Party. And it's like I said in my monologue, Trumpism is whatever the hell he wants, right? And he can actually move people in primaries and more based on his name alone. How do you exactly, people like yourselves who believe in, in this original kind of MAGA ideology, how can you grapple with that? Is it just by calling it out the way that you are? As a political movement, what are you to do with this?
Well, I think the thing that I'm working on is showing people where the money is going, because that seems to me the hardest evidence to illustrate, look, you're not getting what you're paying for. In the lead up to the 2020 election, nearly $1 billion went missing. Well, actually, it didn't go missing. It was funneled to family and friends of the Trump administration. And this was happening at the same time that the campaign was begging its donors for money, by donors, I mean like everyday people for money. People. And I was talking to campaign organizers across the country who were saying that they had a hard time getting anything funded. The response from the Trump team was, we don't have any money. When that wasn't true, they finished the campaign with a surplus. So where was that money going? Where was your money going? The same thing happened after the November 3rd election. Between November 3rd and January 31st, the Trump team raised $255 million, ostensibly to overturn the results of the election, excuse me, but only about $8 million of that $255 million went to legal battles. A large portion of it actually went to a slush fund, the Save America Pact, through which Trump can pay for anything from golf course memberships to travel expenses or even direct payments to himself. And in Georgia, the same thing. There was all of this fundraising supposedly to help secure Republican victories, but very little, if any, actually, of the money that was raised to save Perdue and Loeffler went towards actually helping them. So where is the money going? And I think that is probably one of the most effective ways to point out, look, if you look beyond the rhetoric and you follow the money, well, money talks. And if you listen carefully, you'll understand what a person is really all about, a person and their movement.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the story of American politics right there. Pedro, great to have you.
Thanks,
you.
Pedro. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Next on Rising, we're going to talk about MSNBC analyst Malcolm Nance and how he's saying the Trump movement could become a domestic political insurgency. I wonder what he means by that when Rising continues.